Go ahead and call to order the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly Work Session of Thursday, June 26, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. and we are in the Assembly chambers. The first item is citizens' comments. The local number is 907-486-3231. Toll-free number 855-492-9202. Limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and this is the only time on the agenda for citizens' comments. Anyone wishing to come forward or call in, please do so at this time, please. Any calls? No calls. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda items. The first item is a presentation from the Kodiak Collaborative for Child Care and After-School Programming. Amy, I'll turn this over to you to start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have the members from Kodiak Collaborative here in the audience, and they have a presentation to give to the Assembly tonight.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. I'm Erica Blondin, and this is my partner.
Beata Daly.
We've been working on this. Could you make the, just like the first slide bigger? I don't know if you can. Thank you. There we go. There we go. That was more like a slideshow. So what we are and what we've been doing, we're a grassroots movement of volunteers and local entities trying to help solve the child care crisis in Kodiak. This started as a simple conversation over a year ago at a youth basketball camp. It began gaining traction in November, December, and it really took off when we had our first meeting in February. We have explored a few avenues since then to get where we are today in the progress that we have made. These are the entities that have participated in more than one of our community partnership meetings and discussions. Even sitting right here, we've met with or spoken to Bo, Dave, Larry, Jared, Ryan today, Mayor and Borough Manager Williams. Next slide. Okay, so this is I updated this a little bit because we got some more solid information from CANA on Sunday. So what we began with was a three-pronged approach. We broke down the age into three age groups: infant to pre-K, K to 5th grade, and then 6th through 12th grade. The infographic that you see shows the current child care and out-of-school time options for the youth of Kodiak. So I changed this a little bit. So we have the U.S. Coast Guard Child Development Center. It has been open for over 35 years and was first licensed in 1990. It's the only NAEYC accredited center on the island, which is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. They promote high-quality learning by connecting practice, policy, and research. So I know that the Baptist Mission also used to have that accreditation. So it's a really great thing to have for centers here on island. There is another center, so there's three centers. So we have CDC, the Alutingen Child Care, which is 2 years to pre-K, and the River of Life, which is birth and up, I think. I didn't get that down here. Oops, sorry. All right, so then we have 8 licensed in-home. I want you to pay attention to how long these people have been open, because this is where I think we're going to start seeing even more issues. We have 8 licensed in-home here, and over half of them have been open for over 20 years. The newest ones still have 5 or more years experience. So that is what we have for infant to pre-K care on Kodiak that is licensed care. Going to K to fifth grade, the Y Kodiak After School Program is working on its state licensing. They use some of their state licensing from the Ys in Anchorage, and they're able to transfer it over to Kodiak. So they're currently working on that. That'll be open to all youth of Kodiak. You don't have to be a KIBSD student as long as you have transportation to get there. The next one is the Family Investment Center, and actually serves youth ages 5 to 18, but the core ages are 5 to 12. And they are also looking at expanding their teen programs. And then, again, the Coast Guard CDC, their school age program picks up from Peterson, kinder to fifth grade, but they mostly serve kinder to third grade in their school age programming. And then, of course, the 8 licensed in-home care. I didn't differentiate about what ages were in those because they're all various ages in the at-home care. So then we got to 6th through 12th grade. Looks like we're pretty covered on K-5, set up on how we can help the community right now and be pretty solid in those age brackets. The City of Kodiak Parks and Rec Teen Center needs love and support from our community to make it more engaging. And the U.S. Coast Guard MWR Teen Center are always trying new and engaging activities to keep their teens involved. It's been a pretty fun conversation between teen centers and how can we get kids more involved during our meetings. So, yeah, there's that first part.
Perfect, okay. So it's always fun to throw numbers on a slide, so I'm going to provide some context for these numbers for you. So starting at the Children's Fair, we started pushing out a survey and in an attempt to identify and get some actual numbers on where needs are. Because of this survey, it's one of the reasons that YMCA was able to move into Kodiak so swiftly. It's typically a 2-year process, but we eliminated a lot of that work with the work that Kodiak Collaborative's done. So for the survey, we had a little over 230 responses from community members with children. So looking at those first 2 bullet points, that was the question of, do you currently use or need childcare for infant to 5 years old? And about a fifth of the respondents had secured, like thumbs up on that, and about a third, it was around 30% of respondents have not secured childcare. That's, I'm on a wait list, I need it, but haven't found it yet. And then the other half of respondents just didn't have kids in that age range, which goes to the third bullet point, which is part of the question of what type of after-school care are you using? So outside of that birth to 5, looking at after-school hours, 20% of the respondents have their kiddo going to a daycare, like one of those in-home providers that Erica was referring to. 30% have a family member or an older sibling caring for. And we've questioned a lot about how many grandparents might be shouldering that burden caring for their grandkids after school. But one of the biggest highlights here that made YMCA's eyebrows go up and down, where the 96% of the respondents would utilize an after-school program if it was available. Our survey also asked parents what interests they would like to see in those after-school programming, what topics covered, and 80% clicked on life skills. Art, that wasn't a huge surprise with the art. I find the life skills was a biggie, and that was followed up by STEM was a little over 70%, and a little under 70% was academic tutoring in after-school programming. There was also a area of the survey, and it asked families what they saw as obstacles were to obtaining childcare after-school programming, where they could type in their answer. So we created a word cloud. So this is not on Facebook comments. This comes directly from the survey fields. And you see availability, cost, lack, I mean, words that you would expect to see, but they definitely showed up plenty in the survey. And then switching slides. Okay. So now that we've got YMCA, K through 5's pretty covered, so no elementary school kiddo needs to be home by themselves. Here's where we're working out next, is we've started meeting with CANA Workforce Development and discussing maybe having some sort of symposium that brings in all of the resources that are available, that if you would like to become an in-home provider, maybe there's some young moms that don't want to go to work, they want to be home with their kids, but they also need to bring in income. CANA has resources to help those families become either licensed providers or CANA approved provider. Also bringing in current in-home providers to share experiences. Erica mentioned that we have a few that have been doing this for 20 plus years, which begs the question, what happens when they want to retire? Is there anybody that's going to pick that up for them?
One of those 8 are retiring in August.
So, and that's where the informational night comes in. And then we've reached out to the Kodiak Economic Development Corporation. I attended one of their workshops, and their executive director had mentioned a survey conducted by the KEDC with high school students related to career development. And one of the findings from their survey was that the majority of Kodiak high school students want to stay in Kodiak. And it had all of the adults in the room kind of turning their head like, that's really important. That is really, really important. So we've reached out to them to find out a little bit more about their survey and digging into what do our high school students feel like they need here? What options are they wanting to see here so that the adults aren't doing that work and guesswork for them? Where do they see it lacking? And really splitting that secondary approach. So we have in that 3-prong slide, we have secondary altogether, but middle schoolers are very different than high schoolers. And so we need to tease that apart a little bit further. And then finally, why we're here tonight is, one, we get to speak to all of you all at once, and we're following quorum rules. It's nice to have these conversations with everybody all at once. That's part of the mission of the collaborative. And then also to keep in mind, ask that you keep in mind when facility use, that we do have this huge need in our community to support childcare and working collaboratively on solutions. How can we get more people to maybe be an in-home provider would be one. How can we serve the needs of our teens? And how can the borough be a part of that? And then finally, thinking of ways that we might be able to incentivize people to become in-home providers for that specialty birth to 5 years old. And then thinking outside of the box. So recently, it was passed by the municipalities of Anchorage, passed it by the voters. The voters said yes, and they're now putting their taxes collected from the sales of marijuana into a child care trust. That trust fund will bring in $9 million. And how they're setting that up is in the form of stimulus grants, so that childcare providers can apply for the funding to offset operating costs, because Anchorage wants to keep their childcare facilities in business to fill in the need, and also to summer camp providers. And that funding can also help support childcare workers to help cover their own costs of childcare. And it's this creative solution of using a tax money, putting it back into the community where the community needs it. So just passing ideas along to our community decision makers here to think outside of the box when it comes to supporting this great need in our community. And one of the nice things about a work session is we're hoping that we'll get some feedback from you guys tonight.
Discussion. Ryan?
Thank you. Let's see, I wonder if we could back up a couple slides. Let's go right there. So I'm a data guy and I like numbers. So did I hear you correctly when you said you had 230 responses as your respondent pool for these numbers here?
Yep.
Perfect. Is it safe to assume that the same respondent pool gave you the indication that most high school students wanted to stay here? Or is that a different respondent
No,
pool?
that was actually a separate survey that the Kodiak Economic Development Corporation did.
Okay,
And so that information point was delivered at one of those workshops that they were delivering. So I reached out to KEC to find out more, because I'm a numbers gal too, to find out more about that survey and what other questions that they asked. And subsequently, they are going to be issuing yet another high school survey. And so working together, if there is information we're wanting access to, that it could be combined on that survey. So we're not surveying out our community.
perfect. I do have one more question.
Go ahead, follow up.
So one of the major drivers that I didn't see in tonight's presentation is costs. So I'm fortunate enough where my youngest is now a sophomore, but they're all a product of Kodiak, all of them. And so as my kids got older, the costs continued to rise, and it got to a point where it was very difficult for our family to afford this. And so what I would be curious in is like a rough number or cost per child, X duration, some sort of derivative of a dollar value. If in future presentations, or if you have that data now, I would love to have some more data.
Great question. And I think I have some information for you. So cost did pop up in the word cloud as one of those obstacles. There was a question on the survey: please check the amount you consider reasonable to pay for after-school care. So each month for each child. Yeah. And so it was an income-based sliding scale that most respondents felt was reasonable. 72% selected that. And the next one was 40% as the state of Alaska's school-age child care assistance,
Which is 670.
$674 a month.
Which is what the Y will be charging, and that's the set by the state.
Erica, go ahead and speak into the mic so
Sorry.
public can hear.
I know that's what the 674, like that's what the Y will be charging. But they also do income based. So like that's the max that they charge. And then they do income based. And then if you still cannot afford it, there are scholarships available. You can apply for childcare. They set you up for childcare assistance. And if you don't qualify, then they still have scholarships. They don't turn children away. I'm not sure about the pricing of the other local entities.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
If non-in-home one is set up, would there be some kind of voucher system or something based on income? See, I don't know how the state of Alaska works. I know in Massachusetts, I have a good friend who runs one. About 90% of their people are subsidized. It's in New Bedford, very poor part of it, and most of those parents can't pay. And so there are vouchers set up. They've got grant for transportation, so they have a bus that goes to all the schools to pick up the after-school people. And I don't know if any of that's been looked into or not.
In a dream world, yes, we would want them all together so it's easier for parents. But right now, the most feasible option, like with the K-5 for YMCA, will be in Peterson, Maine, and East, operating until 5:30 or 6 o'clock, whatever the community or the families decide works best for our community. All of the in-home licensed providers in Kodiak, if you are a licensed provider, you are able to accept child care assistance. And there's child care assistance from the state, and then there's tribal child care assistance that you can get from CANA or Shunak. I'm not sure which one holds it now.
Go ahead.
So then it seems to me, I mean, 1/5 responded they have daycare, so that means 4/5 don't,
Right,
which is a much more relevant number in my mind.
right.
And is that purely cost, or is a lot of that space?
Well, keep in mind that half the respondents just didn't have children in that age range. So
Oh,
now
okay.
you're really looking at 50% of the respondents had kids in that age range, and 1/5 then of the 50% have it secured. Yeah. Availability, so if we're looking at what the reasons why they don't, availability is a huge one.
Wait lists?
Wait list. If we look at Shunak's preschool, they have, I think, is it 37 kids currently enrolled, but they have a wait list of 37, and some of those kids on the wait list aren't even born yet. Parents are getting them on a wait list.
Pre-planning.
So it seems to me then one of the real problem is space available.
And those willing to create a center. I know that creating a center is a very big deal. And a lot of in the data, in the research, and the outreach that we've done, the biggest issue is babies to age 2. Because license becomes a lot tighter. It becomes space restrictions and ratios. But 2 and up, I mean, we just saw Shunak start a successful one. River of Life started one in 2014, same idea. But we just have to have someone who'd be interested in doing that. Now, CANA has in their workforce development, they are available to help people who are willing or want to learn more about starting their own childcare, in-home center, et cetera, and becoming licensing and everything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bo and then Larry.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here, and a lot of work has clearly gone into this, and you're volunteering to do it, so I'm sure everyone's really grateful for that. So a few questions I have with the YMCA coming online here soon. Do we have any sort of projections on what the need is going to be after they're online? Because I do understand they have the sliding scale, so that should meet most demographics that they can meet as far as the age availability for their initial program offerings. Do we know where the gaps are going to be after that?
I think, are you meaning like how fast are they going to fill up? I'm sorry.
As far as
funding.
those needing childcare, whether for those 3 brackets, where's once the YMCA's online here and they're going to have those 3 schools ramping up after school programs, which of those 3 demographics do we need to
Focus on next.
Yeah.
Like which ones would we prioritize?
right?
Yeah, sorry. Infant to pre-K and 6th through 12th grade.
Okay. May I follow up?
Go ahead.
If I could just add one note onto that, I think that the infant to pre-K is going to be a longer road than the teens. So they both need to be done at the same time, and it's going to be more of the chipping away at that infant to pre-K and just keep grinding on that one, but simultaneously doing the secondary, those grades 6 to 12. Yeah, but we'll probably see quicker results with the secondary than we will with the infant to pre-K, but they both need to be done at the same time. Just they have different length roads, I believe.
So, and I know there's still a lot of work to be done in information gathering. When you mentioned support from the borough, we represent the borough. I'm not going to make a decision on my own. I will share information to people when it's made known. What are you asking of the borough and the community to contribute?
We realize that there's probably a lot of conversations that we don't hear from a collaborative standpoint. So by presenting this information to the Borough Assembly as a whole this evening, that we're putting that little file card right there in your mind. So as you have that 30,000-foot view of Kodiak and all of Kodiak's workings, you have that little file card in your mind of, could we do X, Y, Z, and that might help with the childcare needs. So we don't always see all of the pieces for the exact ask, And we're willing, when we do see an exact ask, we're more than willing to ask. But what we'd like the Borough Assembly members to do is look at those pieces that we don't see and help us try to reach these solutions. You might not have perfect solutions, you might have ideas, and we're so open to ideas.
Because we are not a nonprofit. We are just a volunteer grassroots. At this point, we're just asking for help, like just, even just help making phone calls, like what other kinds of things can we do to help Kodiak become more, not of a childcare desert. I know a big thing has been brought up over and over is, what are we going to do about employees, about staffing? I'm like, well, once we have childcare secured, I know K-5 is just a start, but it's a big chunk start. Families can work, if we get that childcare set up and then we get the other childcare set up and we have this whole system, then we have our workforce. And that's why workforce development is so involved in childcare right now.
Okay, thank you both, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Larry?
Well, I believe the lack of childcare for parents is a community problem, and it needs a community solution. And I think it's also, if we were all women sitting up here, probably we'd have a different perspective perhaps on the whole thing. But it is a problem, and it does affect our community in many ways. Many professionals will not come to Kodiak, especially women professionals, if we don't have some way to take care of their kids. It's not just housing that's causing a problem. It makes it hard to hire people. It's the availability of childcare. And I think that affects our entire community, not just professionals. And I've seen it happening for a long time. Previously in Kodiak, a number of years ago, perhaps when both of you were that age, Small World was a co-op developed in Kodiak, put together by a group of families. They eventually bought the house where the dance place is right now, and they took care of a lot of kids. And my first, I think, 5 years at North Star, we had a before and after school program that was packed with kids, so parents could drop their kids off at as early as 7 in the morning and come as late as 6, and we took care of them through Small World. So I think it's an important activity that you're doing. I think it's long overdue. I think it has a hidden impact on our community that people don't see. There's a lot of, and it mostly, from my experience, it mostly affects women and prevents them from entering into the job force, which is not a good thing for our community when we can't find people. A lot of jobs that we want filled around here can be filled by people who are already here if they were able to do something with their kids. So I think it can happen. I think it's everybody's problem, and I really like the way that you're working with a lot of folk. I do believe it's a matter of safety. I can tell you that many kids are left on their own that are very, very young, and people can critique that and say, how dare they do that? But some of the economic stress that people are facing, they don't have any choices. They don't have grandmothers or aunts or uncles to place their kids. And so it's very hidden. People aren't always aware of it unless it affects you because nobody's talking about it. So safety, I would also say that, this part of my job was regulating all this statewide for several years, and the regulations related to this are probably the most intensive in the state of Alaska. But there is a lot of support. There's a lot of ways to do it, and I believe if we work together that we can make it happen. And generally, these kinds of things are nonprofits. They benefit the community. I don't know, where cost seems to be managing everything that we do, and it's our responsibility to find, to carry out our legal responsibilities. But I think what you're doing is great. It's needed. It will benefit our community economically. The payback is great. The research is clear on what it will do for the community, and it's about time. And I was really sorry when Small World folded because it really made it, we immediately had staff leave, and my sons like to do this during meetings.
Your time's up.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve and then Jared.
Can we ask?
You want a question? Go
Yeah.
for it.
The Small World, do you know when that closed?
Or why they closed?
I know why, but I'm not going to say that.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
okay.
Well, I also assume just
That'd be
because
helpful.
being in this and like, I mean, everybody knows that I was a teacher, they're like, why don't you just start your own? Why don't you just do it? And it's like, but I don't want that to be something that just ends with me, right? You know, you can start a nonprofit, because I wouldn't be starting a for-profit, because I definitely, childcare should be non. And I just think that it was very interesting that people would just go to that, like, why don't you just do it? But my assumption, and this obviously isn't the full assumption, but is that, you know, there was the same group of kids, a lot of them aged out. And I see a lot of that, you know, I was very interested in childcare when my kids were young.
Younger.
My youngest is 6. So I
Moving to
think just
school
the
age.
moving up in age groups, you know, doing it forever, except for these little in-home guys, they're rocking it.
Well, what's interesting about YMCA is they have the infrastructure to specifically support these after-school programs. So, you know, we've seen things come and go here in Kodiak, and I've often wondered, you know, is it just, we see a need and we try to do it, and, I might not necessarily have the complete infrastructure to keep that running in perpetuity, right? Like to keep it sustainable, whereas YMCA comes with the model. This is what they're designed to do. And so navigating things like licensing and regulations, childcare assistant, I mean, that's what they're designed to do. And so it's our hope that that makes it a much more sustainable model for Kodiak.
Steve and then Jared.
Well, I lived next to Small World, and it was nice when it was going. Unfortunately, it did close for some circumstances, but it was basically self-sustaining.
Right.
There were other issues that led to that. And then my other question is, could you please flip to the slide that shows your email address? I know I saw it. I thought it was near the beginning. Okay, thank you. So I can write it
Thank
down.
you.
Okay. Jared, then Ryan.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for coming in. We've had conversations before about this, so I don't have too much to add, except there's one segment that, and it's the kids that we actually don't know about where they go. We were at the Alaska Municipal League conference, and there was a presentation from, was it someone from Deed or and with all of their data and all of their surveying, there was still a huge chunk, 15-20% of Alaskan kids, they had no idea where they go after school, who's taking care of them. And so I imagine that there's, there's that situation here too. So, and maybe the Y has a program for this or a plan for this, but how to reach those families that have just taken themselves out of the whole thing, and maybe these are kids or families who need more just like proactive reach out to get those.
I think that's where the partnership with educators comes in. Our classroom teachers are really well-versed on their students and the school climate and looking out for their students. And so, someone like Erica, right? Like, your students' families and where they go, and we'll relying on those dedicated educators that take that time to know their students and their students' families, and to give some insight on how to reach out to those kids that would otherwise fly under the radar.
And that includes the partnerships like with, KIBSD, KIHA, Providence, CANA, just like the all-encompassing support instead of siloing out, which was what we've been doing.
Right, and one of the benefits of running the YMCA program at the school site, because then there's that interface between YMCA personnel and the classroom teachers there at that school site.
Ryan.
Me again. So I was just crunching some numbers based on your respondents. So essentially 76 respondents did not have childcare services. If they all took it and they all paid the max at $674. Now, I realize I'm having a discussion about the why, but I just want to talk about the economics of this. So if they all paid the max, this is a $50,000 a month venture, but each person has a scale ranging from $15 an hour all the way up to $45 an hour, depending on the after-school needs or during-school needs or any of your divisions up there. So really what I'm looking at from an economic scale is, can people, I understand there's a sliding scale, but can people actually afford this with what the demographics are and the wages that are currently being sustained here in Kodiak? There's not a lot of people that can pay $45 an hour for kid care, So that's one of my concerns. And I just wanted to state that. I don't need any answers. I just want to state that there's still an economic concern that I would love to dive or at least get more data on.
Are you asking about, like the child care assistance? Is that what you were asking about, or?
Not necessarily, just from a dollar perspective, overall dollar perspective.
Like in being self-sustaining?
Yeah.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, I'm just looking
Right.
at this from like a business
So that's
perspective.
why it's there in a I mean, the golden thing about this one specifically is that there's not they're in a use agreement with the school district. So they're running out of their additional time, not costing much overhead for YMCA, but they're also completely self-sufficient. And so they do all of their funding and fundraising and everything and spread it to whichever one that is available, whichever location.
Right, but the aftercare model itself is sustainable from a YMCA perspective. There's programs that they do run, extra programs that cost them money, and so like if you're YMCA Anchorage, for example, they're making, where they tend to make their money is in their gym memberships and things like that to pay for those programs that they lose money on, so they could still offer those programs, but after-school programming is not one of them. So the funding that they do have, or what they do charge, even with the child care assistance, because we've had this discussion specifically with Nate Root that was here, the CEO of YMCA Alaska, and it is self-sustaining. In terms of an affordability, so if I don't make much money as a community member, would I be able to afford it? Well, that's where the child care assistance comes in. That's where scholarships come in, so that my kiddo can still participate in that program and I can have that need taken care of.
Can I continue?
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, so I've got actually a couple things on here. So one of the things that I've learned on the short time of being on the assembly is the community and the borough, and likely the city, does whatever it takes for kids. Like, they pretty much put kids first. But they do so by coming in and saying, if you guys don't give us this, we're going to have to close. We're going to have to get rid of this program, and we pull on heartstrings. And so I'm really looking at things from an economic standpoint and really from a business standpoint. The questions, just a couple other quick questions. Are there food services at the Y? I mean, sometimes kids might not eat.
We can absolutely give you Nate's information, and you can send him an email. There's all the information about USDA. They'll work with the school district because USDA is held by the district.
Because I can tell you, having a paintball field, an unknown cost is food costs. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But that also leads and lends itself to the safe place. Like Larry had mentioned earlier, there are participants that come because it's the only safe place they know. And so I really do support what you guys are trying to do here, and I love it. And I love the fact that this is a group of volunteers trying to collectively put something together for the community. I think it's great. So not only do you have my support, I'll help you volunteer. I'll volunteer and help out. So let me know what you need.
Nice, thanks.
Showing the teens to the.
I'd like to thank both you, Erica and Beata, for all the effort that you put in for this over the last year. Many people haven't seen or had any idea what you've been doing. I appreciate you reaching out and inviting me 2 different meetings that you've had. Thank you for that. But thank you so much for what you've done for the community.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Any other questions or?
Thank you.
It really was a team effort. It was, we had, what, 2 dozen show up at the first meeting. So CEO of Providence, Ed Canna, and it's, yeah, the whole community cares.
We've been sending these emails, but sometimes I think firewalls get in the way.
That could be a borough incentive, right, to businesses, offer some kind of incentive to businesses offering team nights.
Thank you, ladies. All righty. Next agenda item is discuss a request for a resolution of support for the Presidential Ocean and Fisheries Emergency Declaration. Amy, I turn it over to you to start the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On April 17th, Mr. Robert Lindsay of OPR Alaska submitted a public agenda presentation request, requested that the Assembly here consider and discuss a possible resolution in support of the National Presidential Emergency Declaration pertaining to Ocean and Fisheries Emergency Declaration. And Mr. Lindsay is here tonight.
So that's a really tough act to follow.
Yes.
And 10 years ago, I would have never thought I'd really been able to understand that, but I can understand it from a rather unique perspective. And it's, I cannot thank the River of Life enough, because you try and find childcare for 7/12 night shift. Yeah, anyway, it's beyond help. And it's those that are stepping up. We really have, this community is just above and beyond in so many ways, As I hopefully grow wiser, to truly appreciate what we have, and all you have to do is flip through any news service and you go, wow, this is paradise. So, and again, it's hard to follow because that's pretty near and dear, something we can all relate to. And I'm trying to cover what's taken me since 2016 to wrap my head around, although what we are asking for is that you engage us in promoting the idea that we think the resources of the ocean in general are in jeopardy and could well be declared a disaster and should be considered a disaster. Particularly here, we can relate to that because of our life's experience here. And while it's very hard to get everyone to engage with, wow, let's just go declare a state emergency, we're not saying, and we're not engaged in the business of finger pointing in any manner, because you can point to overfishing all you want. You can point to most of the arguments, but they still don't come back to the center thing. Facts. 2/3 of the seabirds are just missing, and then they find these masses of seabird die-offs. They're all emaciated. And this year, in particular, the gray whales, lowest number of mating pairs ever in Mexico, least number ever calves recorded, since they've been keeping track. Again, well, they've had changes in their feeding patterns, and that's what we're boiling down this to. I mean, it's taken me from 2016 to really begin to comprehend the science that is behind this. And I think many of the agencies feel like to do so would impugn them or say that they've been at fault for the inability to manage. But if there's simply not enough food to go around in the ocean, then everything takes a hit. Growing up in the same spot, on the same beach, I've been looking back and clear into the molted crabs. Pretty much any time I walked down to the beach, you could find molts of all the little crabs, but king crab particularly. And it wasn't just right before 1983 I stopped seeing it. It's going, wait a minute. I stopped seeing those in like the mid-70s. I didn't see those little crab molts. And so I think that, and there's been some research really interesting. Bob Foy wrote a fabulous paper, did a really amazing study. In that he looked at climate change and tying climate change to CO2 absorption in the ocean. And he pretty well predicted, too, within a few years span, the demise of the crab population out west tied to increased carbon dioxide in the water. And he did it with quite a fair number of crabs, and he kept incrementally inching up this, and it doesn't take a large change. And that could be climate change, but it could also be a disruption of the plankton cycle, because the plankton cycle is the planet's way of managing carbon. And this is where it's been so hard for me to understand. And I'm hoping Russ can put that a little more easily understood than I can, because I've got the gist, but I don't have the science behind me. I can relate firsthand, having experienced in the last decade what would be, they call them disasters, but I call them emergencies, in the salmon fisheries in Prince William Sound. And, I mean, Prince William Sound, it's like, you know, that's what they say, we retire the guys in Prince William Sound. You train them up in Kodiak, you bulk them out in Southeast, and you retire them in the Sound. I mean, it's a lot of hatchery fish and phenomenal returns, and yet we see these wild spikes, and the hatchery fish take a lot of blame for eating the other fish out of house and home. But it still ties back to that. There's just not enough food to go around. Anyway, at this point in time, I have to say that the presidential resolution, while not off the table, is not drafted. Russ was drawn into a group effort of people, and quite a number of them wanted to kind of hitch their wagon to our plankton type development along with making their own little pork barrel project out of it. And it got to Trump's desk, and he just said, no, I'm not signing this. The door is not closed. We still feel that a resolution is in effect. And we've also had, one of the effects of the Trump administration is that many of the agencies are operating differently. And the EPA, which is mainly worked by controlling and regulation, is actually, in my opinion, wisely looking for proactive projects, as which we consider our project to be. And so if I can't belabor this too long, is Russ online? I'm going to let Russ take it over.
Okay.
And I'll be available for any questions. And
you are now answering a call from the queue.
Russ takes over. Okay. And I'll be available for any questions. And
you are now answering a call from the queue.
Russ takes over. Okay. And I'll be available. Okay.
You there, Russ?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am.
No.
All right.
You have the floor.
Sorry, I'm a little. All right. Well, Rob has got a lifetime of being a fisherman based in Kodiak, so he really gives you. He's the real grassroots. The situation keeps evolving here. We went from having that to write an order for him trying to bring the fish back to America. And since Alaska catches about America's fish, that means bring back the fish to Alaska. That's still, it's not off the table. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with the Environmental Protection Agency, and they were very, very keen on this topic, and I think that's thanks to the president's new EPA leadership. Right, and so after many years of dragging their feet, we probably need to get a project underway, and so we're in good shape. But of course, we're back to this story. We've expressed this to you guys before. We need to show that we have some community and grassroots support for this, and so that's why we've proposed this simple declaration that the borough could pass could write up a letter of declaration saying we're not asking. We know the borough doesn't have funds to work on ocean restoration or ocean science, but it has people, right? It has a voice at that table. So that's all we're looking for is is a letter of support that says there really is an emergency taking place of Alaska, which are the oceans of America. And there's a solution that's been worked on for 50 years of federal research funding has gone into this. And it's time to, and we've proven it with my work in the Gulf of Alaska. We brought back the largest salmon returns in all of history back a dozen years ago. So I'm hoping to keep this kind of a short and that you consider this declaration that we've and write some version of it to the White House, right? That I can personally get back to the White House and say, look at Kodiak, Alaska is 60% of the American fishing industry, and Kodiak is the #1 fishing port city in Alaska. And here's the Borough of Kodiak here, and there's a solution with great promise. Let's get on with it. And so that's a sense to make a decision on. So I'll let that be enough.
Are there any questions of the two? Bo?
Thank you. I appreciate both of you putting the effort in here, and you're clearly passionate about what you're looking to do. Sitting in this room right now, I can easily identify commercial, sport, and subsistence harvesters with very few people in the room. So clearly this is a Kodiak issue, Alaska-wide as well. But some of the questions I have is when I read the draft resolution, Part 3, we recognize the importance of collaboration between local institutions, NOAA, and the private sector to ensure the success of this urgent and vital initiative. As it sits now, the project and the ask for the resolution, I can't support it, but I'm going to say yet, because I don't feel that the work has been done to study what the potential impacts could be, and this is the perfect slide to stop on right here. And the reason I ask that is I read every page, every line of the information you submitted. It's really interesting information, but there's very little about potential unintended consequences, and specifically I'm worried about ocean acidification, domoic acid. Here in Kodiak, the domoic acid levels are so high that people can rarely go out and even harvest clams because they're unsafe. Recent seabird and marine mammal die-offs have been linked directly to domoic acid now as well. So it's starvation and domoic acid. So if we support a resolution that results in a project where you have these massive blooms that we're going to create to sustain that trophic level, is there any information or any studies that you're looking to do to see what levels of domoic acid would be produced there, or other types of acids that could have an unintended consequence of even larger die-offs of other species? So these are the kind of things I think about. I completely agree something could and should be done, but I think this project's maybe a little ahead of process. Now, if you came up to us and you had industry stakeholders, local, tribal, federal agencies backing this through support and some science, then absolutely I could support it. But for myself right now, without having this information, I'm just going to say I can't support it yet. But I do really appreciate the passion and the time and the effort going into this. With more information and more support from other various stakeholders, I would absolutely get behind you.
Well, it's, you raise a point about doing more science. I don't know if 50 years of federally funded science has been completed now. So if after 50 years of scientific studies on this, and not one single word has ever been published in that 50 years of science linking domoic acid to these kinds of situations, to what we're proposing to do, I don't know what I can say. 50 years. If 50 years isn't enough, then it's not enough. And there's no possibility of suggesting, the idea that every imagined unintended consequence has to be researched and studied and proven to be excluded. That's an impossibility, right? And so then, that's it.
Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I also appreciate your guys' presentation. I have to say, from an environmental standpoint, and I will caveat this with I am not oceanic sciences, environmental science, but I do have a fairly basic understanding of how science works. But more so on Bo's point. So I will tell you from an environmental standpoint, when we're trying to identify, we'll just say unintended consequences, because that's the term you used. I'm not familiar with domoic acid. However, I can tell you from a soil science standpoint that you can test for stakeholder concerns, and I would echo Bo's concern, who does this as a career, to at least look into what domoic acids are, and we can look at other acidic traces, and we can look at pH levels, and we can try and do some tiebacks to data and science that's already there and in place. And I can tell you from a environmental science standpoint that when stakeholder concerns do come up, that there are enough organic connective data results that exist that you can formulaically, is that a word? Let's make it a word today. That you can actually come up with a fairly good hypothesis whether or not something does or does not exist. So I guess in the gist of trying to summarize this, not knowing the aquaculture industry, I'm going to have to lean on my fellow assembly members to support or not support this. And with Mr. Whiteside being in this industry as a career, I would reserve my opinion on this matter until he is appeased. So, thank you.
If I may answer to this, because this is one of the parts that I picked up on, and it was always the first time I heard, every time I talked about this, was domoic acid. And we're talking in domoic acid, you're talking pretty much relegated to a nearshore problem. And not to say that this answers all questions, but what you're saying is that we need to go and study the offshore blooms. As you look in this picture, you can see where the offshore blooms are. And they're right next, not next to the beach. And these are natural events that occur every time. And some are significantly stronger, as in 2008, and in 2013, 2008 being a natural event caused by volcano Kasatochi. In 2012, caused by Russ George's experiment, which goes by various names, chief of which is the Haida Gwaii project, in which iron was applied in an ocean eddy, which is where the massive plankton blooms occur. There's so much science. I just wish we could have a symposium where we could get together. And we're not in a hurry for this, other than the time to do the project is in May and June, when natural events have to concur together to put the iron in the proper place in the ocean to make this happen. We're not doing something that's not already happening naturally. Russ has, through his work and also with working with Dr. Martin, developed a type of iron that is much more readily absorbable than many other scientific projects have been. And one of the concerns is the greater scientific community's projects to date, of which there have been somewhere around 30, they usually have to mix the acid with mix the iron with an incredible amount of acid, which causes a reactive process. And yet it still can produce a bloom. We can't carte blanche say that there's no risk of domoic acid, but if domoic acid was going to be a problem of our application of iron in the open ocean, where iron is very, very scarce, and that's the root of the problem, then you would have to look at the near shore where you have massive amounts of iron available. The iron anywhere near most of Kodiak, it's 1 million times higher than what you can find in the rate that we would hope to achieve with application in an ocean eddy. Ocean eddies are unique in that they have a very unique footprint per their location, because it comes together over time from the environmental conditions that create that ocean eddy to exist. And say the Haida Gwaii eddy, which at times has a reach from the Haida Gwaii all the way to Midway, and you can see it. And now we have the satellites watching, you can see that. And you have greater and lesser events according to what's naturally available. We don't know all of the reasons, but many of the reasons. What we're saying is we want to replace the missing dust that we're not getting from Asia, and we have a lot of evidence to support that. Again, I'm trying to explain to you what I took by picking Russ's brain for almost 10 years now, and to me it's kind of easily understood. As the red dust from the Sahara is responsible for the prolific growth in the Amazon rainforest, so was the dust from the Gobi, Tibet, Mongolia, which has greatly been diminished with the urbanization and coming in first world status. I mean, China has greened up. I think many of us have a mistaken view of China, but they have an incredibly tree planting program, and there's other environmental factors as well. But we know that when a volcano goes off and it lines up with timing and winds, and it puts the iron dust in the ocean, you're going to get a big bloom. And again, we can't categorically say, no, there's no risk, and there never would be. But what we are proposing is a mesoscale project, not a large-scale project. And when we achieve the results we want, we bring the iron background level up to 3 parts per billion. And, that's pretty hard to look at it as overdoing when there's, 200,000 parts per million, or no, 200,000 parts per billion in anywhere, say on the west side where you've got the big iron deposits, or probably here in the harbor where you have natural events. So we can't, again, domoic acid is the first. There's many other things, but as a farm pasture left to the wilderness tends to go to rot and decay, the farmer steps in and applies his husbandry and brings up the soil chemistry and can produce pretty good results. We're up against this. We need to go and study this. You can't really study it without doing it, and that's where we really wish to go. It does look like we're making some success with the EPA. Tying this back to the child care and the fiscal condition of our life here, I don't think anybody in the room can deny the fishing prosperity of our home in the 70s and into the 80s compared to today. Now we're mostly dependent on, 65% government, quasi-government jobs. And we've got a good thing, but my God, do you remember when this place was full of rich fishermen?
Yeah. Rob, we got a couple more questions.
Yes, please.
Steve and then Larry.
The title of this request is Presidential Ocean and Fisheries Emergency Declaration. Now, is this to get a declaration to say the oceans are in bad shape and we're looking for solutions and you're one of them, or is this based around the iron project?
The former, much more than the latter. The
So-
naming of the project was because we literally had a call from the Oval Office and said, we want you, Russ, to work together with this group of people to draft the new Ocean Restoration Act. An act by the same name had been introduced in the Senate in '24, which Buddy Carter sponsored. Russ drafted most of it. At that time, it had a lot of climate change language. That bill would be dead on arrival on the Senate floor. In the present day, it wouldn't get there. But we were asked by the Oval Office to draft the new Ocean Recovery Act, which, again, is not dead, but the door is somewhat still open. Right now, it looks like, and it's probably the better place to pursue the process, is going through the EPA, looking for an experimental project, which I think I am hearing we do need to do this on some acceptable risk level. And while what we're talking about a fairly massive area, I mean, a couple of 100 square miles of the ocean in an eddy that's suitable to produce likely results that can be well studied. And Kodiak is ideally located to do this work from. And I think that's going to have an economic, as well as we have a lot of assets here that could help us tease out the facts.
So the short answer is declare an emergency, but it's open to more than just your group. It's open to several groups
Oh,
to
absolutely.
come up with solutions. It's not aimed
Yeah.
just at this.
No, that was the idea. I mean, there was a group. called
Okay,
the Right-
no,
excuse
you
me,
answered
sorry.
the question. If we support it, we're supporting dealing with the ocean, not just this project, and you answered the question.
Yes.
Larry?
If there was a resolution to ask NOAA, or to tell NOAA that we have an emergency with regard to fisheries, I would support that they need to figure out what's going on. I used to dream crabs, cutting them, and they're gone. And I've unloaded shrimp and the whole works, and they're gone. And something's happening, and it certainly affected our community. And I believe that I remember asking one of my marine biology professors what the heck's going on in Kodiak, and he just said, we know so very little about ocean ecology that we can't tell you that right now. We're just trying to figure it out. And we're lay people here, except for Mo. And while I would support a resolution saying, let's find out what's going on in Kodiak, let's maximize NOAA research, let's really support it. But for me to endorse a specific study, which is essentially what we're doing here, I can't do that. I don't know enough, and I don't want to be a part of invoking the calculus of unintended consequences, where we just throw it out there and hope it all works. I don't have enough. I represent the community, and who knows what might happen, and I can't gamble with making things worse when we're trying to make them better. And I believe that decision is best left to the scientists. I think sometimes our country benefits from ideas that people have that they have to work hard to get people to listen to, and this may be one of them, but I don't believe the pathway is through a governmental body that are not experts in the field and asking us to endorse something that none of us has the science background. And even if we did, we would still have unique opinions. So I can't support the specificity because, as I understand the answer to the question is, it's not just, let's start researching our oceans, okay? It's supporting a specific study, which may or may not be good, I don't know. But I can't do that. I don't know enough, and I don't think it's within my role to do that. Thank you.
Ryan?
Just a question. So based off of your numbers that you said earlier with 200,000 parts per billion iron at near shore, and you guys are trying to increase deep water by 5 parts per billion, I just did some quick, simple math. If 1 gallon is 0.13 cubic feet, 1 gallon of nearshore water would impact 5,200 cubic feet of water in deep water. So have you guys, or has there been any effort done to take nearshore water and take it to deep water with that significant of iron surpluses? That would be a breeze to get that through the EPA. That's probably a single piece of paper.
I don't know. That is a question for NOAA. And we're not even looking to take it to 5. Want to take it to 3. Iron is heavy. It sinks in the natural environment. The size is all over the map. That's what we have the advantage of. We can provide the pasture with something that's far more effective. There's also a latent effect that if you have a big bloom in an area, that eddy doesn't just go and out of control. You can continue to put iron in the environment and it doesn't change. You get it up to enough where it goes, and that's what it takes. And after an eddy has a bloom, it does not recover the capacity to produce another bloom even the next year. And that is dependent on a number of eddies in proximity. The more eddies in an area, the sooner a single eddy could return to a state that could produce a bloom. So many of the fears are allayed by the science that already has been done. And again, we rely much on what Dr. John Martin proved. He unfortunately died before he got to go forward with his life's work. It was done. It was successful. That was a project in the Galapagos, which is known for a very prolific bloom site. And the water off of the deep water off of Chile is very blue, very sterile. When it comes and passes over the Galapagos Ridge, it picks up all this iron, and it just produces this abundant life, as we've all seen on TV looking at the Galapagos. And so many of the safeties are naturally in effect. And two, back to the question from Mr. Ames, no, Russ does get very intensely wrapped up in this, but we're not looking to solely endorse this one and only project. We're looking for the opportunity to go and test the project. And we're not asking you to do that. What we're asking for is, are we experiencing a fisheries emergency here or not? That's the question, yes or no. And then we can let the EPA and NOAA sort that out. That would help us greatly to promote what we're trying to say.
Follow up, Brian?
Yeah, thank you. Just one point of clarification, because I'm not familiar with this process. You guys stated that the Oval Office called and said, hey, go to work and get this done, but now you're asking for local stakeholder support to get the same Oval Office that asked you to get this done to get it to the Senate floor?
No, I may have been unclear. No, the Oval Office reached out to Russ to work with a group of other people, mostly East Coast guys, to draft a new version of the Oceans Recovery Act, which he was looking forward to writing as one of his executive orders. When the end result got back to him, and most of his input was from this project, which is really the one and only project to date that has been done, that has shown significant positive effects and really no negatives came from it. Well, we didn't have the time to study it. And there were NOAA does what NOAA does. We can't control that either.
Jared.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in again and talking with us. Yeah, I have a few questions. The economic impact you mentioned in your study, you're looking for a $20 million in project investment. The idea is to get a resolution passed, to get an executive order that would then open up federal grants in the amount of $20 million, or where is this $20 million coming from? And you're not asking it from us, correct?
No, we are not asking for any financial support from you. we have a very fair number of uber wealthy individuals very interested in this project. And they believe in it for a lot of reasons, and we think that we can bring hope to a lot of the world. The tuna are in a horrible state of collapse, most worldwide, Madagascar, but everybody wants somebody to go first. Your question to me is, again, so I answer it concisely?
Yes, yeah. I think you just have,
We
you have wealthy
outside-
benefactors.
We have outside investors. If the EPA or the federal would choose to endorse this and put some project money, or one of our proposals was worked with NOAA Assets, because they have boats that we have ridiculous amounts of money in that go sailing off to look at birds. And I'm not trying to impugn anybody, but they could have been doing this for 40 years, and they've chosen not to. And nobody has hidden the science. It has not been hidden from anyone. It's there if you go to look.
So you don't really intend to make this a federal grant kind of project?
No, that's
startup?
clearly not our
Oh,
intent.
Okay.
In the end, it's a carbon capture project. And it's going to be self-supporting. The spin-offs from the economic advantage are, we don't know. I mean, it depends where the world goes with global, I mean, who knows where we're going tomorrow? I mean, we just blew up Iran and, you know, but let's say people get their act together and carbon reduction or ocean acidification gets the, I think, the attention it deserves, because we've been studying what's going on out west, and we agree with most of the science, but we're also looking at the potential for this application to reverse some of the effects that we're seeing, not just in the crab, but directly in the crab, and then more in the long term in restoring the environment as it should be. I mean, you can look out west and it's just not happening, but much of it's related to the ice moving north. There's two plankton effects in the Bering Sea. The ones like we see in the ocean eddies, and then they have what they call the ice effect. And so the study, as the ice retreats, you get
I'm
this-
sorry, we're getting off track from my
That's all right.
questions. Is it
Do you
okay
have
if
do you have a
I do. I
follow-up
have
on
a
that?
few more questions. Okay. So do you have, I think this would be easier for us if you had, do you have endorsements from other fishery groups, fishery research groups, science groups, climate groups, universities,
Well,
on this project?
in
You know,
kind-
organizations that can use their credibility to help your credibility?
Actually, officially, no. I mean, it's, no.
And I'm also concerned with the lack of peer-reviewed evidence. So I'm not a fishery, I'm not a scientist, I'm a researcher, though.
Right.
There's no scientific consensus, even if you have been researching this for 50 years. Consensus has yet to be reached on this, which is why I am also reluctant to endorse this resolution. I think, I don't know, there's a play here that I don't quite understand. I don't know if it actually really is a play for federal grant money that'll take work from legit peer-reviewed projects. There are wealthy benefactors who are investing in this. I don't like the idea of Kodiak being a place to experiment on such a wide scale, not knowing the full impacts of what this would do. And the resolution is not, let's, you know, we look at the language of the resolution, the language is not about opening up research opportunities to everyone who wants to come up here and do research. The resolution is very specifically for our guests to establish a headquarters here in Kodiak. And the executive order seems to, or the resolution seems to ask the president to compel NOAA to participate in this, even though in the presentation and in the packet we were given, there's no endorsement by NOAA, there's no research other than, snapshot kinds of things provided from NOAA. So I think you've still got a way to go, at least from where I sit. So I think I sit with my fellow assembly members on that.
To the NOAA had finally pushed the plankton to, they had a very small scale project on the books for this year. I don't know with all the shakeup in NOAA, I don't know where that goes. And that is where we're at, because if you experienced what you experienced we experienced here in 2013, as did most of the salmon fishing in the state of Alaska, there was denying the upside to the salmon. We don't know the upside to other species. We don't know what's missing. And again, I'm just a dumb kid. But I am hearing that you would like to see or are encouraged in hearing about the potential to have this work done so that we can study it in some manner, and I agree. I'm not all about the resolution as drafted. I had very little input to that, but I do feel, we've been living an emergency here since the 70s when the shrimp got wiped out.
Yeah.
And
Rob, we got
yeah.
two more assembly members, Bo and then Ryan.
Thank you, and you're in alignment with where I'm at. Is I think with some additional work towards just studying, clearly the benefits in it, and I agree with, some of these, a lot of the articles here that are cited or references that are cited are by the proposer, but those aside, there are some potential benefits, but it's potential, but there's nothing here that's addressing the potential impacts, negative impacts, and that's what we have to be really cautious about. I understand that it would be localized to a certain area, but if that certain area is all of Kodiak, that could have devastating consequences if we aren't prepared for what that could look like, or even have any idea what that could look like. So again, I support the effort and I support the creativity. I don't want to discourage folks from pursuing what you're going after, but I can't put my support behind it without some sort of preliminary study on how this could affect multiple trophic levels, not just creating a big plankton bloom. That's the obvious outcome. Is that would happen most likely based on the science that has been provided, or been conducted. But beyond that, it's really scary to think about the other end of the spectrum. Yes, it could be a boom in productivity with salmon, but on the other side of things, it could devastate ecosystems. And these are 10-year plus currents we're talking about too, that don't just stick around here in local. They will eventually spread out to the Aleutians. They will go down to the North Pacific Current will connect with the Pacific Current. This could impact have a far greater extent than I think we're thinking about initially. But again, I don't want to discourage folks, but I think a little more information would be really helpful for us.
Ryan.
So I'm just going to be specific. So I'd like to see a controlled study with data grouping. I would like to see peer-reviewed data and at least one university endorsement before I give a yes from me. I am an environmental scientist, both by education and in practice. So in order for me to get behind this, I want to see the actual data. And so that data would need to be peer-reviewed, and then you'll get my unconditional support. Thanks.
Okay. With that, I'd like to wrap up. I want to thank Rob Lindsay and Russ George for participating tonight in this roundtable discussion. So I'm sorry that I'm not seeing a consensus come out of it right now other than wanting more information. So
Well, and I am entirely in agreement. The problem we find ourselves, it's just so circular, and we're trying to see something happen, and you've got to be there. And I think if it's meant to be, it'll happen. Why not?
Thank you for the presentation. Next item we have on the agenda is discussion on nonprofit funding process. Our Borough Manager, Amy Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Each year, the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly approves funding to be dispersed to our local nonprofits, colleges, and libraries. For fiscal year '26, we have $100,000 in our Kodiak College and Libraries line item, our Health and Social Services line item, and our Education, Culture, and Recreation line items. Additionally, the Assembly has decided to include Fund 273, which is a special revenue fund where we've been storing our opioid settlement monies. There is currently $119,506 in that fund. The purpose of the discussion tonight is for the Assembly to identify the process that they would like to determine how the funds will be distributed. At our last agenda sending, we talked about nonprofit funding, and the DPO, Mayor, and I discussed different ways that this could be done, and we wanted to bring it to the Assembly so you could decide. Applications are due on Monday, June 30th, and depending on what methodology you want or what data you want from staff, the first time that the Assembly will see it is the work session on July 10th.
Discussion. Questions. Jared.
I'll start us off by saying the obvious, because this will probably be said at least 3 times during this discussion, is that we spend more time on nonprofit funding discussions than we do on the school district budget, which may or may not be true. And Larry says it's true. The process is for us, this will be my 3rd time doing it, or 4th time doing it. It is cumbersome. It seems ad hoc. It does allow us to kind of individually advocate for specific interests or specific organizations. We go through this whole negotiation thing with ourselves, and it's 100% well-intentioned, but I think it is it's so time-consuming, and I don't think it's quite inconsistent over the years, but I think that we can give our nonprofits maybe a little bit more predictability. I like the application format and process that the borough, that we have the nonprofit organizations go through. I think it mirrors a very traditional kind of low-stakes grant-making standards there. So I don't really have much to comment on the application thing itself, but in trying to think of maybe a more effective or efficient way to go about doing this, I thought about a couple of things. Yes, the line item for nonprofit organizations is big, but all of our borough nonprofit grants are under $25,000, and the borough manager already has spending authority up to $50,000. So I would like to see, I would like us to, I don't know if we need to do this via resolution or through consensus or something, but delegate the power to the manager and maybe a team of grant reviewers that the manager sets up with Megan, with grants person, and maybe somebody else, maybe somebody on the assembly. And come up with their own administrative process for working with these individual grants. I think this doesn't mean that they're acting without our input or without the public's input and guidance. I think that we could still have a work session where we go through the applications and communicate our desires to the manager. Without holding, individual line item negotiations. And then the borough manager and her team can go through the applications with public input. We can invite public comment and all the whole thing. We just have to do it once. And then at the end, the manager can present us with like she usually does with contracts, presents us with a summary of awards, recipients, amounts, purposes, maybe. Just like we do with, other grants and other contracts, and then, of course, still stick to the basic annual reporting, to help keep everyone accountable. So I think by delegating it out with our guidance and input, so that there's still political stakes as well as financial stakes, I think that could reduce the complexity of the process for us, reduce time. I think it aligns decision-making a little bit better with an established administrative authority so that nonprofits don't feel that they have to make 7 or 8 phone calls, necessarily. Which, there's this whole dog and pony show that we make the nonprofits go through in this time of year. And I think that we can eliminate that pressure somewhat. It's still a public process, but I really don't think that we should be the micromanagers of funds, especially when we're talking about $3,000 grants. I think that's well within a manager's purview. So that's what I thought of when I thought of how can we make this more efficient for all of us. So that's an idea.
Steve?
I think the idea of having them come up with a draft and a proposal is good, but I think the assembly should vote on it, and it has nothing to do with the present administration group that would be making decisions. But I can't help but wonder in the future whether you get someone who's gung-ho on certain things and not on others, that it could be skewed easily. And I have a great fear of that. So I think your idea is basically good, but before the money is confirmed, the proposal should be given to the assembly, and hopefully there'll be a minimal of bickering between us and different nonprofits. But it would add a layer of protection if we had a semi-rogue person skewing them greatly, which I see as a possibility. Thank you.
Larry?
I think this is probably the 100th proposal to refine the process that I've heard.
Me too.
What comes to my mind, and I appreciate what you said, and I don't have any disagreement with it, except it puts an incredible amount of pressure on the manager and to make decisions that we can tinker with and we have final approval, but she'll be the one that cuts people or gives people money, and I just don't think that's her role, and we shouldn't put her in that kind of position. I think she can make recommendations, but ultimately, in fact, I thought we were doing fairly well the last few years because we only spent like 3 days on it. And, but, where we set certain amounts and we based on how much money we have, and we sort of divided up sort of with an algorithm and then looked at any new applications or ones that are gone. And it seemed like a reasonable process, but I've been through a process where we had 3 borough assembly members come up and put together a plan, and everybody tore it to pieces immediately. And then, so I thought what we were doing was starting to work, and but I'm game to try something new.
Bo?
If it's not putting our wonderful manager on the spot too much, through the mayor, how does the manager feel about that?
Thanks for asking. Something happened a couple of years ago where Assemblymember Sherritt had the assembly do a matrix on what they thought their priorities were. It's kind of almost like a strategic plan for nonprofits. You did. It's weird, and it's weird how that worked. And then once the assembly decided what their most important things were, and it was like life safety, education, you ranked it.
Sorted
then
itself out.
Right? So you gave priorities, and it was really easy to assign those. So if the assembly would do that again and say what their priorities were, then I think that stuff just falls into line really quickly after that. I know that I'll call it something else besides strategic planning, but if you just make a priority list, that would be really helpful, and then I think that would be really easy to do. I think every year we have like the same top organizations getting the bigger amounts, and then it's just the other ones that we typically start around 20 to 25 for a certain group of nonprofits, and then everyone else is around that 5,000 range, and then we just kind of fiddle from there. But that year that we did the priorities, I think that was the easiest. I've only done it 5 years. That was the easiest year that I saw.
Yeah.
I agree with Amy on that. Ryan?
I know it's late to ask this question on the form this year. However, next year, I would actually love to see a question on the form that says, how many times have you or advocates attended a meeting and publicly testified or advocated for your funds?
That's a great one, and part of the agreement they sign is that they will update the borough, and then when they apply, they have to tell us what they use the funds for that fiscal year. So when you get the applications, there is no question exactly like that, but that's easily added. But I think the answer back of how they use that funds that year is really telling, because you can see what they applied for and then what they actually used it for. And Kodiak College, if they don't use it all, actually gives money back at the end of the year if they haven't used it all for the program that they said they were going to. So pretty spectacular.
Follow up, Brian?
Yeah, I love that. If they don't use it, they give it back. This question was brought on by a nonprofit who said, hey, we just filed our application. And I said, great, are you going to come testify? And they said, no, we never have. We don't have to. They just give us money. And I actually took offense to that. Because if we want community involvement, if we want stakeholders to come and be involved in local government, but they don't because we just give them a blank check, I actually have one that I'm not going to fund this year. While I have the floor, last year I donated my entire assembly stipend to nonprofits. I'm going to do the same thing again this year, but I don't want that to be used as a budget line item as it was discussed the year prior. I think that was unfair and unjust. And so, again, I'm saying this as making the same statement, but that was used against me in that fund discussion last year, and I really hope that we don't do that this year. Thanks.
Steve?
I agree with Ryan in the fact that if we're going to be giving them money, it would be nice if they would come here, tell us what they've used it for in the past, tell them how it's helped the community and why we should give them money, why they deserve it. That's not saying they don't deserve it. I'm just saying the fact that, oh, no, we apply, we get a check, is a bad answer. I would like to see it justified.
Amy?
I think that it would be nice if nonprofits came in throughout the year and reported in, and we didn't get 52 nonprofits on the night we were talking about nonprofit money. I think, and I've always given that advice to stay relevant, right? So if you come in throughout the year and you tell us about what you're doing, I think a really good example of that is the senior center. They come in almost quarterly and tell us how many meals they've served, how many people they've reached, what they're doing. When I think of nonprofits and I think about the effective use of money, the senior center is ding right at the top of my head because they constantly come in. So they serve as a really good example. Brother Francis is another one that comes in really frequently. So those are going to get money because we've heard about them all year long. So I think the saying at least twice a year, putting some language in there, preferably not the night that we're deciding, right? So I think we can add wording in there that requires them to come in and report if they're going to ask for money the next year or something along those lines.
Steve, you have a follow-up?
I'd be real happy with if all the small ones just told us once a year, and the large, we give a dollar line, and we want to hear from you twice a year if you're getting 25,000, and we pick a line, and if you're getting 3,000, once tell us what you did with the money. And is there a question on the application exactly of what their intent is to use the money for? I assume there was, but assuming is dangerous.
Go ahead, Amy.
There's also rules around the use of opioid funds, right? So they can only use them for certain things. So in the application process this year, there was a link so they could go read all the regulations. And so if they're applying for that money, they have to show us how it fits inside of those regulations. So there's an extra layer for those funds this year.
Amy, do you feel you have enough information right now to go forward?
I do, if you say that you want to use that same priority list that we did
Yes.
with health and safety being the top and education being second, like that kind of order. And then would you like a suggested starting place from staff when we show up on the 10th? Okay, thank you. Then yes.
You got it. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next, which is future use of North Star Elementary School building. Staff report, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The North Star Facility Work Group met on Tuesday, June 3rd to review both the Kodiak Island Borough School District and the Kodiak Island Borough's needs for the building and grounds. The Chair, Mayor Arndt, is going to update the Assembly on the progress of the discussion. But before he does, on the back side, or on, I guess, page 2, In the packet that night or that afternoon, we talked about a proposed 3-year plan. The general consensus was to hold on to the building for 2 to 3 years to make sure that our data stayed the same as far as student count. In last Friday's paper, the Kodiak Island School Board had an article, well, they had a school board meeting and it was in the paper, and there were a bunch of numbers listed in there for the cost. I put it into a little spreadsheet that's in front of you tonight on the dais. At the meeting that we had with the North Stars group, we were talking about somewhere around $90,000 a year. They asked us if we wanted their security cameras, and we foolishly said yes, because I had no idea there was going to be a price tag of $47,205 a year for those.
Plus.
Right, plus it's fiber optic cable to get to their servers at the school district. So I think we can do some things at a different price point if we want security cameras. But I'll let the mayor update you, and then I met with some people on Monday. So after the mayor is done, I'll update you on the tours that I gave on Monday.
Okay. Basically, when we had the meeting, went over different things and kind of come up with an idea of a suggestion is what it was a 3-way split. And then in talking with the members on there, and then talking with the city, because was looking for, when I was talking for him, was looking for an ex officio member from the city, which would be Bob Stanford. And then my understanding is he has agreed on that. And so we're looking at, spoke with Nova about changing the makeup, so ex officio adds another ex officio member to it. So that's where we're at right now. Then we're going to meet again in August. We haven't set the exact date, but that'll be the next thing to get all the information that's needed. So Amy, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the packet review tonight, you'll see that there is a resolution adding that ex officio member. On Monday, I took CANA and Shunak and Kodiak Island Housing Authority up to North Star, and we toured the building. Shunak is interested in moving their daycare from St. Mary's to North Star, and they're interested. Right now, everyone has to work out a lot of numbers, but they were very interested in an entire wing and the library space. So that would be a really great opportunity if that works out. Kodiak Island Housing Authority has some ways that they can help them financially, so they're working on that. We looked at Cana's physical therapy moving up there as well, and that space didn't really work well for them. So, but we are excited to possibly, obviously the community wants to use the gym, and so being able to rent out an entire wing is pretty fantastic. I've also had space requests from Erica Blondin with YMCA, because YMCA, she'll be working for YMCA, so they'll need office space. And then Mary Beth from Little School of Dance has asked about space as well. So I think they'll probably have to work with the city and Parks and Rec to see what space and when, but it's very exciting to see some interest. So our main job going into August will be get a better grasp on what we think the costs are going to be. And then when we're asking for rent money or help from the city, or the school district, to know how much we're asking, how much help we would actually need. And at that meeting we had with the facilities group, we said as we got renters in, it would lessen the burden on the school district and the city. So that was the goal, that our renters would be paying for the cost of the building.
Ryan.
Thank you. So I don't know how to ask this question without seeming abrasive. So insert smiley emoji. Here that works. I'm just going to point blank ask, can we maintain this facility if we maintain ownership of the facility in a manner congruent with long-term sustainability? Because we have a track history of not being so hot with maintenance on our facilities.
We certainly do, and I think that that's a problem. And as we get further into the meeting tonight, you're going to find out that we are looking to hire, well, it lists 5, but I added a 6th today, 6 employees into engineering and facilities. So we have not had a maintenance coordinator, like a supervisor of our maintenance staff, since I've been associated with the borough. We have not been able to hire laborers. We have not done preventative maintenance. We've had a lot the people we have are excellent, but they just can't do everything. And so we're looking to bolster that staff and get those positions filled. So once we have a maintenance coordinator who will supervise the maintenance staff, we're going to use our program that we already have. It's called Maintain X for preventative maintenance. So I think there's hope for that. The other option would be outsourcing, if that was applicable to that building. I think having people in there, it will be taken care of much better than if it's empty. So I agree with you. We don't have an excellent track record, but I'm hoping that we can make that better moving forward.
Follow up, Brian, and then Steve.
Yep, thanks. So the smiley emoji worked. Appreciate it. So with that being said, I am specifically interested in like a triple net lease that would include maintenance that looks nothing like the hospital maintenance. It looks nothing like capital improvements and I'm not interested in an enterprise fund. I'm not interested in anything like that. However, I'm very interested in any occupant putting together a actual facilities maintenance plan that covers small procurement items. If we take lessons learned from things like the pool and the hospital, and we take all of the goods that we have from those facilities and we memorialize those, and we take all the bads and we limit those out in whatever potential lease agreement we have, you would see one very happy assembly member. Smiley emoji.
Steve.
When you say a maintenance manager, are you referring to the borough buildings, all of them? Or,
The maintenance supervisor would be the person that's in charge of all of our maintenance staff. So they would be in charge of the laborers. They would be in charge of our position is called building maintenance specialist. That's like, so we have one that works at KFRC and we have one that works here in the borough buildings in this area. But because we only have one person working at KFRC and one person working here, the person that works here is also mowing all of our lawns. And if you pay attention to our Facebook posts, you'll see a massive problem that we have at Dark Lake where the community has just decided to make that an alternate dump site. So we have mattresses and motorcycle frames and just so much garbage. It's almost a full-time job just keeping that clean. So with a lack of, like, we're not doing preventative maintenance because we're too busy cleaning up after people's trash.
okay, and then I think the people you talked about who are interested in it, I'm quite pleased with. I think the borough needs to do a thorough, hopefully in-house assessment of the building, of what maintenance has been lacking and should be brought up to par. And then the contract needs to reflect who's responsible for what maintenance. But first, there needs to be a major assessment of the building, but as I said, hopefully in-house. I don't want to bring a bunch of engineers in and complicate things, but bring it up to par.
Well, we already know that we have to fix the roof. Right?
Yeah,
So that design's
that's an
underway.
obvious, we've
Right.
discussed that. Now, I know there were steel beams that needed painting and a couple years ago, and I don't know if that's been taken care of, paint peeling and rust, things like that. So the building's brought up to par. And then we have a base point to work from in a lease contract. Thank you.
Bo and then Larry.
Thank you. I mentioned this lightly during this recent meeting to discuss this facility with our other stakeholders, and my concern still is lingering in the back of my head right now, or now it's in the front. If we have these nice groups move into this facility, establish critical services that the community is going to get used to, and then this is a 2-3 year plan, we start coming out of the trough for student enrollment, and that either stabilizes or starts to increase. Are we communicating that this is a short-term scenario for any entities that are interested, and what is our game plan there?
Hang on. Amy and then Larry, I'll give you.
Sorry. So yes. So when we toured with this group, we told them, it's a suggestion that Assemblymember Ledoux had at that meeting, that we would put in you'd have a 2-year notice. So if our school count changes and we are going to reuse North Star as a school, anyone using that space would be giving a 2-year notice that they had to relocate.
Larry?
Were you finished, Bob? Okay. Just a couple of things. I think my own experience with the building, it's in fairly good shape. It's got new siding and new windows, and it's been well taken care of, relatively new compared to our other buildings. One of the things that has been brought up periodically is to sell the building, and I just want to address that. It cost us $10 million to build it. A good part of it came from the community. To replace it would cost us, I think Scott mentioned 30 million. I'll just take his number. It's probably going to go up from there. If you look at our capacity of our buildings, we're not low capacity in our buildings after closing one of our buildings. Each building has different strengths and weaknesses, based on when it was originally designed and built, and especially related to changing programs that require different kinds of spaces, particularly, you might say, the increase in youngsters who need special services, who need individual aids, or et cetera, et cetera. One of the reasons that we have a poor record on maintenance is because we put off maintenance to take care of the current needs. We keep putting it off and putting it off. And I've said this before, but I think it's important. If our enrollment increases, we will need another school, and we can't afford it. Okay. And we're looking at the state is not going to get involved. They're not involved in maintenance anymore. They're not involved in paying. And I will point out that the original proposal to build a new high school was turned down by the Borough Assembly in the early 90s, and that decision cost us $80 million because the state would have fully funded a new high school at the time. And we knew the cohorts were coming. I mean, we knew that we had 200 student cohorts coming through the system that the current high school wouldn't hold. My point is that North Star is an asset that is very critical to our community as it grows. To sell it would be to come to the conclusion that we're not going to grow ever. We're going to stay the same. I don't believe that we are. The other couple of other points on a different topic. One is, I don't know if the costs include alarm inspections, fire sprinkler inspections, or snow removal, unless Service District 1 wants to take care of that. It's just because they have a nice director.
No, it's not part of the road right away, so
Well,
no.
I know that, but also the lighting along Atmalai, is a cost. I'm not really worried about it, but I think the plan is good. The last question I have is, and I believe we have to have somebody else manage it. I don't think the borough wants to get into that business, but wouldn't we have to go out to bid for the use of the facility? I mean, I understand people are interested in it, but wouldn't our own ordinances require us to go out to bid for the use of that facility?
Amy?
I
don't think so, but
I think that we could let the public know that we're looking for renters for sure.
it's not
I
open
don't think
bid.
it's I don't have a good answer for that. I'm gonna have to do some research on that. It seems like yes, because we have to do that for everything, but I'm not sure how it is on the building ownership and rental. We did have to do that with the mental health buildings when we were looking for occupants for that, because that was part of the requirements from the federal government because of that deed restriction, but I don't know about North Star, so I'd have to look into that.
Ryan?
Thank you. So, one of the things that I am specifically interested in is in our Envision Future 2030, we've got 5 key criteria that are listed in there. One of them is optimize the effective use of community resources and assets through partnerships for the benefit of borough citizens. I believe that any potential use of this facility needs to be measured against our Envision Future 2030 plan and have some sort of rubric that defines whether or not we're meeting that plan and that optimization. Since we have Mr. French here, if there's anything that, the economic development and that plan, if there are, what I'm trying to do is link other documents and publications and efforts that we've already done and tie it back into our decision-making matrix for who can utilize this facility under what premise. I just don't want to go backwards.
Any further questions of the manager? Jared?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Ryan is saying. There's overwhelming community support and has been overwhelming community input, I think, on keeping the building for exactly the purposes that Ryan laid out. I would be against selling it. I imagine, right, we might say, oh, we might get, X number of $1 million if we sell the building, but I imagine, like what we were planning if we sold the hospital, was to actually not use that money, but to put it in a fund so that in case we needed to buy it back or to build a new one. So it's just sitting there accruing interest. So it's not going to provide any tax relief, or anything like that, I would imagine. So I think it's in the community interest to, explore alternate uses. And I also had the same question as Larry about checking statutes, ordinances, the deeds, to see what kind of restrictions are on there if we're going to parcel it out in a way. I have no idea. But yeah, let's keep it community.
Okay. With that, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then start packet review. Thank you.
5?
5. Puts it on the clock.
I said nothing, but like that, I mean, when you do something and then you can get together and do it and say that's that. Right.
Yeah. Appreciate the initiative, but no, exactly, yeah, you can't get behind it. They've had 50 years. Really, they're not interested. I mean, if it had that kind of, if the merit was there, they would be interested. The collective. I do feel bad for him. He seems, from my perspective, kind of just kind of the mouthpiece for this other guy. He's like the guy petting his cat in his lair, Like, yes, go speak to that. We've never seen this guy. I don't know, that's a weird dynamic. Yeah, it is. But I totally think it's a play at federal. Yeah. And, if they have rich benefactors in the wings, that's a study. There's no university on the planet that wouldn't be like, you want to give us how much to study what? Right. Sounds great. We're on it. Yeah. Make the check out to. Yeah, exactly. And we will get started on hiring. Money. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I'm going to get on board with that. Seeing my
mics are on.
I can do that, but,
No such thing as a 5-minute break.
so we'll go ahead and reconvene the work session and move on to packet review. First things is contracts. Contract number FY 2024-32, change order number 1 with Jacobs Engineering for spring 2025 surface water monitoring support. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Each year, the Kodiak Island Borough conducts surface water monitoring and compliance with the landfill permit requirements. Sampling events and reporting are mandated twice annually, once in the spring, either April or May, and again in the fall in October and November. To streamline contracting across fiscal years, the borough has requested that Jacobs Engineering submit a change order proposal to include the spring 2025 surface water monitoring support under the existing contract that currently covers fall 2024 monitoring services. Our interim E&F director, Cody Allen, is here tonight to answer any questions that you might have.
Discussion, Ryan. That's where I look first.
First. I feel personally attacked. Okay, so, Mr. Interim Director, my question is simple. We've got a 40.76% cost overrun, in my opinion. Is this an effort to avoid rebidding the project?
So the short answer is, in my new role, every day is a school day, and so this contract was already in place. And through research, we figured out that the window was supposed to be for fiscal year, but they originally bid it for calendar year, if I understood Jenna's explanation accurately. And we were the only entity in the state of Alaska that was doing this work partially in-house and then outsourcing the remainder of the work. So the current contract recommendation is to extend it because they've already basically been doing the work. This is just finishing the process that we've does the sampling, sends it off, and gets the results that we can provide to the state. So they're like our quality assurance. If I'm, again, like gathering what the intent of it was, I don't know how we got here, so I can't really answer the question on if we are circumventing the contract.
Can follow up on that, Ryan.
Thank you. So, first, I want to recognize that I understand this is within the manager's authority, and I appreciate the fact that this is here and the discussion is, in my opinion, fairly moot. However, because of the contract change percentage, I greatly appreciate it being here, and I also appreciate the explanation. I just wanted to ensure that we were not avoiding a procurement process, and it doesn't sound like we are. It just sounds like getting cleaned up, and I appreciate that explanation. Welcome to your new role.
Yeah, and one thing, in the next year, we will be bidding it as a new contract for the next fiscal year for the full scope of services, so it won't be all chopped and subdivided.
Any further discussions or questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next, which is resolution number FY 2025-21A, amending the membership of the North Star School Facilities Group. On there, staff report, me?
I think any of us can do it.
Go for it, Amy.
At the March 12th joint work session with the school board, the assembly discussed establishing a North Star facility work group to address specific issues related to the future use of North Star Elementary School. The work group had is ad hoc in nature and is scheduled to remain active until December 31st. The work group held its first meeting on June 3rd, and the consensus was reached to add an additional seat to the work group for a City of Kodiak representative. So you will see a change on line 32, adding a City of Kodiak city council member, and Bob Stanford has been named and approved by Mayor Branson to be that person.
Any questions? None, we'll move on to the next, which is resolution number FY 2025-26, authorizing the manager to accept grant funds from the Alaska Community Foundation for the Bayside Fire Department Kids Fire Camp. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bayside Volunteer Fire Department's Captain Shelby Backus applied for and received a $14,000 grant from the Alaska Community Foundation for a kids' fire camp. This 5-day camp is designed to accommodate up to 40 children aged 6 to 12 years old. The purpose of the camp is to teach children what it is like to be a firefighter and EMT, visit other emergency servicers such as City of Kodiak Police and Fire Departments, Coast Guard Fire Department, and the Alaska State Troopers. They're also looking to build a sense of teamwork and responsibility within the community. Bayside Service Area has pledged $5,000 to the endeavor. In your packet tonight, you'll see the resolution accepting the money, the letter from the Alaska Community Foundation, and then there's just information about the grant. And they are very excited and have this all planned out and ready to go for this summer.
Any questions? Seeing none, move on to resolution number FY 2026-2A, amending resolution number FY 2026-2 to clarify the oil and liquid waste description on the Kodiak Island Borough fee schedule. Staff report, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This resolution clarifies what type of oil the landfill accepts, defines liquid waste, and corrects two incorrect measurement designations. The new effective date would be July 4th, 2025. And if you're looking at this and thinking, didn't we just pass this? Yes, you did. You did on June 5th. The very next day after it was passed, someone brought a whole bunch of cooking oil out to the landfill because it said oil and it didn't say motor oil. And so we immediately needed a clarification around the cooking oil. So you'll see on all of the pages, the effective date moves from July 1st to July 4th. Once you get to page 4, there's a per pound calculation update. There is a clarification that the oil excludes cooking oil. On page 5, there's corrected measurements and definition updates. And I believe that's all for the rest of it. If you have any specific questions, once again, our interim engineering facilities director is here.
Steve?
Is there, and it would be commercial, is there a way for restaurants to dispose of cooking oil on the island?
Not at the landfill, sir.
So basically, the answer is no. Which unfortunately leads to what I've seen, which is 5-gallon things in boxes filled with used cooking oil, but in dumpsters, which is a bad
mess.
situation that maybe needs to be addressed in the near future.
Cody?
So the short answer to that is yes, it can be disposed of at the landfill. It's a matter of interpretation, and there's like solidifiers that can coagulate the material, so to speak, so it can be disposed of properly. I would like to make a slight correction. The organization that they attempted to bring it, they did not bring it to the landfill, and it was only 5 gallons. And so that was resolved with the solidifying agent, to my understanding.
Any other questions? Thank you, Cody. Next item is resolution number FY 2026-3, a joint resolution of the Kodiak Island Borough Assembly and City Council appointing 2 members to the Kodiak Fisheries Development Association's Board of Directors. And Lena, I think that is you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So for this resolution, we do it annually with the city of Kodiak. I believe is passing theirs today because I believe they canceled 2 of their July meetings. So essentially, we received an application at the beginning of this year from Gabriel Prout, interested in one of the vacant positions, which has been vacant for some time. And then we had some seats that were expiring. So this resolution just presents the expiring seats and appointing the 2 members to those seats. Let me just pull up the report here. The term for one of the joint appointees expires in July of 2025. I sent an email to Linda Freed, and she contacted Mr. Anderson, and he did indicate his desire to continue, which is great, for another 3 years. And there's also the one I mentioned for the crab harvester representative borough appointee, and that one will expire in July of 2027. The clerk's office did receive an application from him in January, as I mentioned previously. And he is very interested. We were not able to appoint him previously, as this is usually done by resolution with the city of Kodiak. So I believe City Council John Whitten, his seat is also terming out this year. So I think in their resolution they are including him as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, then move on to ordinances for introduction. Ordinance number FY 2026-3, amending various sections of the Kodiak Island Borough Code, Title 17 zoning, to define pet-related uses and to locate these uses in specific zoning districts as either permitted uses or conditional uses. Staff report, Amy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on the proposed code amendment on May 21st, 2025. The commission voted 5-0 with 2 members absent to recommend approval of code amendment to the Assembly. The commission's recommendation with findings was organized into the Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution Fiscal Year 2025-11. The signed resolution is attached to this agenda item. Title 17 currently permits pet boarding facilities in rural neighborhood commercial district as a conditional use in the urban neighborhood commercial district. Staff researched the issue and determined that the code was lacking definitions to define pet-related uses and that current districts where uses were allowed were both inadequate and not in conformance with best planning practices. The requested changes cover a variety of sections of Title 17. Our Community Development Director, Chris French, is here tonight to answer questions and walk you through the changes.
Chris, I figure I'll have you walk us through the changes, and then we'll see.
Okay,
There's
thank you.
questions.
So we'll just go to the ordinance then. You have your findings on page 1 of 7, and the ones to look at are the two from the bottom, I guess, or the one starting with the public necessity and general welfare, and the other one are both public necessity and general welfare. Those were the ones that the commission used in their resolution recommending approval. On page 2 of 7, we begin the proposed amendments to the code with definition changes. The current code does not have any definitions related to pet-related uses. The uses in question that the commission were looking at originally was pet boarding facility, but they also looked at, we didn't have definitions related to pet grooming or training, and for animal shelters, as well as for veterinary clinics and animal hospitals. In addition, as the borough manager mentioned, we have very few zoning districts where any of these uses are permitted. The ones that we do have, there's very few amounts of the actual borough that's zoned in the rural neighborhood commercial or the urban neighborhood commercial. And so the proposal here is to define these uses, these 4 uses in the code. And so animal shelters, pet boarding facility, pet services, as I mentioned, includes grooming and training, and then veterinary clinics, animal hospitals. And then going on to your next page, page 3 of 7, we'd be adding to the RR2 district a conditional use permit for pet boarding facility. In the RR1 district, a conditional use permit for pet boarding facility. In the R2 district, pet services as a permitted use. In the R3 district, pet services as a permitted use. In the B business district, adding veterinary clinics, animal hospitals as a permitted use, as well as pet services. In the business district conditional uses, adding pet boarding facility. In the rural neighborhood commercial uses, going on to page 4, would be to add veterinary clinics, animal hospitals as a permitted use, pet services as a permitted use, and then in the rural neighborhood commercial conditional uses, adding pet boarding facility as a conditional use. In the urban neighborhood commercial would be to add as a principal use, pet services and veterinary clinics, animal hospitals, and then pet boarding facilities as a conditional use. And talking about animal shelters, the current animal shelter is located in the light industrial zone, so we would be proposing to add animal shelters as a permitted use in that zone, and then also adding it as a permitted use in the public use lands zone. Going on to parking requirements, we added parking requirements primarily for pet services, veterinary clinics, animal hospitals, and then for pet boarding facilities where we're recommending that use be a conditional use permit in those zones as I listed. The commission would establish the parking requirement based on the characteristics of the use. Pet boarding facilities can change depending on, do they provide doggy daycares? Are they just overnight boarding? How many dogs do they manage? Do they do other kinds of pets? I've seen some where they've done cats and boarded them. So it just depends a lot. So the parking requirement really needs to depend on the character of the use, where it is, and then also we have to look at drop-off and pickup areas as well. And then for veterinary clinics, animal hospitals, we recommended a 1 to 300 square foot gross floor area, 1 to 300 square feet gross floor area as the parking requirement for that, and that was based on review of other veterinary clinics throughout the state. In addition, going on to 17260, which starts at the bottom of page 5 of 7, we made some changes to the conditional use permit section to provide some clarifying language, but more importantly, when we get into paragraph C, the idea that the commission wanted us to look at, and this was something the borough attorney and I discussed and worked through, they wanted to have some standard conditions of approval or some standards associated with pet boarding facility conditional use permits. And so, as you'll see in paragraph C, number 1 under pet boarding facility, there's letters A through E, and that'll deal with things like are there going to be any outdoor runs? The recommendation is to say it's fully enclosed unless the commission approves it as part of the conditional use permit to allow outdoor runs and things like that. Allowance for signage, allowances for how fences are dealt with, noise, and also how making sure there's a plan for animal waste disposal. And so those were set standards. Of course, as a conditional use permit, the commission can add additional conditions on a case-by-case basis during the review. And then those were your proposed changes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions or discussion? Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that, move on to managers' comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The borough was informed this week that our school bond debt replacement was $254,919 less than what we had budgeted. I reached out to our state lobbyist, AML Deed, and our state legislative delegation. Through a lot of emails, we've figured out that House Bill 53 started out with an amount that was $4,040,942 less than what Deed calculated they needed to fully fund the program. We received an email back from Senator Stevens saying that he's going to look into the issue, and our lobbyist has also volunteered to help research the issue a little bit more. At North Star, I already told you about our facility tour that happened on Monday and our space requests. I met with Mindy Pruitt with Kodiak Island Housing Authority earlier this week. She told me that the borough and Keha have had a bad relationship in the past, and I said, well, I don't even know about it, so we don't have to worry about it. So we're talking about how we can work together with our organizations and talk about housing. She was very interested in our talks about ADUs and short-term rentals and stuff like that. I also mentioned we had two beautiful buildings that she could build housing into sitting right in front of borough property. So she said that she might be interested in taking a look. The Hospital Facilities Advisory Board met on the 23rd. We talked about priorities for maintenance and discussed that we're going to need to relook at the hospital lease and long-term care center lease. And we had a very frank discussion about the lease payments not being enough, and they said that they understand that they're not enough, and we're going to discuss the leases or start discussing the leases at our next meeting on July 21st. For current recruitments, we are recruiting a building maintenance specialist, a maintenance coordinator, director of engineering and facilities department, solid waste manager, environmental specialist. We actually had someone start into that appraiser tech job. We're looking for temporary or full-time laborers and an accounting technician to fill our payroll technician spot. In community development, we're continuing to work on the comprehensive plan. We have transportation and community facilities. Surveys online available now. They're at that last sentence of that paragraph, and there is an open house that's going to be held here in the Borough Chambers on July 22nd from 10 to 2. We haven't had great success with our evening forums or our early afternoon forums, so we're going for lunchtime to see if we can get more people to come. So we'll have more reminders out. Again, that's July 22nd from 10 to 2 here in the Chambers. Planning and Zoning had a work session on June 11th. They conducted training and reviewed issues related to assisted living homes, short-term rentals, commission bylaws, and middle housing. The commission directed staff to place the code amendment related to assisted living homes on its regular meeting agenda for July 16th. This code amendment defines both assisted living homes and facilities and assigns zoning districts where these uses are permitted or permitted through a conditional use permit process. In finance, we're in the foreclosure process for the 2023 delinquent property taxes. Property owners have until July 7th to redeem their property before the borough files a petition with the courts to acquire a clerk's deed. At this point, payments for these properties can only be made by cash, cashier's check, or money orders. We're not taking personal checks. Please contact the finance department for your payoff amount. Our electronic timesheet implementation project had its first hardware piece set up right outside of my office. That'll be the first one. We're going to use one department as a test subject department and start trying that out. So we are finally going to get away from paper timesheets. In assessing, we have 34 denial letters out. 2 of those senior citizens have filed for a good cause hearing. We have 50 either senior citizens or disabled veterans that remained undetermined. The Lutig Foundation exemption appeal is scheduled for July 17th. You will have your informational book by July 7th. We have senior citizen and disabled veteran good cause hearings scheduled for August 21st. And from the Board of Equalization that took place on May 5th, we have 2 cases that are being appealed to the Superior Court. In engineering facilities, Dave Conrad's last day with KIB as the E&F director was on June 13th. He's remaining active as the fire chief for Women's Bay Volunteer Fire Department, and we're very thankful for that. We want to be sure to thank him for his 16 years of service to the borough and wish him well as he moves away from the borough. One of our projects we're working on this summer is the Kodiak school painting. Design and specifications for the project are completed. We anticipate that the advertising for this project will start on June 27th, which is tomorrow. That's been out with the ARB, so the ARB could offer any comments on those specifications. We are also renewing our annual electrical services contract. That contract did have extensions left on it, but the contractor proposed a price increase of 30%. After evaluating the proposal, we decided that it was in the borough's best interest to rebid the services to make sure we are getting the best deal for the borough. The bid package is currently posted on the borough website with bids are due by 2 p.m. on July 2nd. We also have a facilities contract out using a format similar to the road service area bids. Staff developed and began advertising a bid package on June 11th. Mandatory pre-bid conference is scheduled for 10 o'clock on July 7th, and bids are due by 2 p.m. on July 17th. We are in our annual tsunami siren preventive maintenance cycle. This year, all sirens are scheduled to get a new battery. To reduce shipping costs, the city of Kodiak has generously ordered all of the batteries on behalf of both of our municipalities. The borough will be responsible for half of the shipping costs and the cost of 44 of the batteries, those ones that are located in the borough. A technician from West Shore Services is scheduled to arrive tomorrow to complete the maintenance and the battery replacements. Our industrial Pump Alaska order is moving forward, and we are down to 16 weeks, which sounds a lot better than the 30 that we started with. Out at the landfill, the Regional Solid Waste Management Plan is underway. Their first kickoff meeting is occurring next week. Jenna's last day was today at the borough, but she got a lot of those questions in before she left, so she was able to help provide some of the information for that, and she has generously agreed to allow us to bug her and ask her questions as we move through that project. We have a couple of smaller projects going on. The bike path brushing is underway. It's anticipated to be complete by June 30th. The contract cost for that was $18,840, and it's clearing the brush away from both sides from the path starting at East Elementary and going all the way out to Abercrombie. The project's office stair replacement is also underway. Red Cross is moving over there, and so we need some good entryways for them. We anticipate that to be complete by June 30th, and that contract cost is $9,000. We also have evaluated KIB facility parking lots to see which lines needed painted. We anticipate starting that right here in the beginning of July. In information and technology, IT has been working on deploying new hardware to staff. Everyone is getting a slow rollout of new monitors. They've been assisting community development with their 2025 comprehensive plan project. They're gathering drone image from the landfill and configuring a new email system for Women's Bay Fire. So both Bayside and Women's Bay, all the volunteer firefighters now have their own domain names so they can have their email addresses associated with the fire departments. IT is continuing to review network security scans and remediating the critical and high-impact findings. And in the next few weeks, you'll see a contract for the software that we use called Dark Trace Intrusion Detection. It's expensive, but man, it's been helping us so far. IT is also finalizing the implementation of a new network connection at KFRC conference room so they can have higher speed meetings. And one final thing they've completed, I just told you, the Women's Bay Fire Department. So as Dave Conrad left the borough, he got to go from his assembly email address to his fire chief, or his borough address to his fire chief address. So he's been able to maintain connectivity. And then also in tonight's report is the projects office report for the month of June. And again, Cody is here if you have any specific project questions. And that's all I have tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions of the manager? Jared?
Just one really quick one. For the tsunami siren, are they going to the villages also?
The batteries are replaced for them. I don't know that the technician is going out on this trip, but we did order new batteries for them, so
Okay.
yes.
Ryan?
I do have several questions. Okay, so first one is just a statement. When you start working with the hospital contract and renegotiations, to whatever extent can be allowed, I would love to be a participant in that. Okay, facilities contract is currently out for bid. The first thing that came to mind with this is that we had 2 of 3 responsive bidders during the last service district solicitation. The responsive bidder had to turn one of those contracts back for lack of staffing or lack of ability to do that. Does that put them on an excluded list for this facilities contract?
Our code doesn't really have language in there that excludes people, but I think that would have to be a consideration as we were evaluating. So because our facilities are spread so far out, I'm assuming that they would realize that, especially the Women's Bay Area one. So I don't think we have a list of people that we won't accept, but Cody, do you know how we're going to handle that?
The answer is no, it does not exclude them. Our code doesn't necessarily allow it, and there was nothing in the bid package that would prevent them from bidding. It was intended because that was a request at the time, was to bid them so one bidder could win all. And the bid bond, so to speak, it was based on averages per location, so the bond would have been like $150, because it was just, that was the number that you're comparing, like the contractors against each other. Does that answer your question?
All the way up until the bid bond part, you had me. I'm not sure what the connection is with the bid bond. What I'm specifically looking at is if we had to change procurement practices from low bid to alternate awardee for a service district. My question is there anything that prohibits them from then bidding within the same, calendar year performance period on other contracts? What I'm hearing is no.
No.
So I guess we'll see how this one goes, but I definitely have piqued interest in this based on recent conditions. Okay, next question is KFRC. Third bullet point down, NOAA's requested the deionized water equipment to be updated and increased in size to accommodate the additional use by another tenant. So I'm curious on this and our role in procuring that for a tenant. So I guess I just need a little clarity on that.
So there's negotiations happening on, is the deionized water a fixed system that the borough should be providing as much as any tenant wants, or as they have an increased use, should they be responsible for the increase? And so that's one of those questions that we're hoping we get clarity from GSA, but we don't have any GSA people to talk to right now, so it's kind of on hold. So that's just going to remain on there until we get more clarity. NOAA experiments are actually going down and like decreasing quite a bit. So their use of deionized water is going to be less and less. Their amount of experiments that they're currently doing due to budget cuts is going to be severely restricted. So I think that one's going to fall off on its own.
Okay. Next question is under landfill, third bullet. There's an ITB to follow the screening on the UST. Is there an engineer's estimate for that?
Unfortunately, we do not do engineers or have not done engineers' estimates in the past. We're working towards that.
Perfect. I would love to see engineers' estimates, even, ROMs, just as to kind of give that. On our small projects, you've got projects office with the Red Cross moving. How did we come up with a contracted cost of $9,000? Is that in-house labor that's doing that with materials?
No, these were all issued and advertised via request for quotes. And so we're publishing our RFQs on the website just as we would an ITB. We just don't have, per the code, we don't have to let it set for the 3 weeks. And then we have a quote meeting, a pre-quote meeting, an actual quote opening. It all goes through finance, the same approach as an ITB.
So the reason I'm asking these questions is this, I think, lends itself to that greater concept of IDIQs and pre-qualified contractors. What I wouldn't want to see is this full procurement process going on for a $9,000 project when we could have a list or a pool of already pre-qualified contractors and we could just say, hey, here's a, like a MATOC or an IDIQ, push this thing out and crank them.
So unfortunately, our current contracts, like you saw the electrical contract in there, those are long-term annual-based contracts with like multi-year renewals. That option has been discussed internally of having like a pre-qualified, pre-approved contractor vendor list.
Perfect. I'm definitely peaked on that one. And the very last thing I have, I promise, is with your staff updates, we've got a few advertised positions in here. Can you define what the process is for me and the duration that runs congruent with somebody walking in the door saying, I'm new to Kodiak, I'm interested in this job. What does that process look like? Who does it go to? And what's that anticipated duration to get them from street to seats?
Street to seat. So today we had a laborer walk in and say, I'm interested in a laborer position. We had him fill out an application right there. He's worked for us in the past, so I imagine his process is going to be very quickly. For the Director of Engineering Facilities, that's open. It'll say open till it's filled, but we're not going to start looking at applications until the week of July 7th to allow people to get applications in. For the ones that have like the higher training requirements, like the solid waste management or the environmental specialist, we'll look at those as they come in. If they're qualified, we'll interview. Like, I don't feel like we're going to be able to be super picky on those, but on that particular one, we're also looking at the possibility of, as Cody mentioned earlier, we're going to contract out the environmental services because we don't have the qualified staff after Jenna is gone. Today was her last day. And so there is a possibility we'll take that aside and just try to hire a solid waste manager. But right now it's listed as both because that's the way it's been done. I have a feeling we'll have better luck getting someone in to run the landfill if we just look for a solid waste manager. And that's the way that other municipalities are doing it. So maintenance coordinators, that's our maintenance supervisor. That is just brand new listed. And so we're just looking for someone with enough experience and leadership, not only being able to hands-on fix stuff, but like to be able to handle running a staff. So for most positions, we say these are open until filled, but for some, if they're like the director jobs, we'll say, okay, this is open. The first look we'll do is during this week, and then we go from there. The applications come into our HR director. She gathers them and lets department directors know that they have applicants, and then they set up interviews when everyone can get together. For like the department director job, I already have a hiring team set. They know that during the week of July 7th, if we have applicants, we'll start looking.
Larry.
Just a couple of quick things. I was at the landfill a couple times this week and getting rid of construction material, and I really, really believe we need a transfer site. It is heartbreaking to see all the stuff that is thrown away in construction that could be used by our community, and it just gets shredded. Windows, lumber, and I wish, I've brought up transfer sites many times, and it just seems like it's impossible to get a really valid discussion about what we could do to support our community that way and at the same time reduce what we're throwing into the landfill. There's some wonderful things being thrown away there that people could use who need them, and we're just crunching it up, and it doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't know what I need to do, fill out a yellow form or something, but I really think we need to discuss this. The idea that somebody visited Fairbanks and said it's too expensive, that's not good enough for me. I think we need some real information on that. So I just wanted to mention that. And also, I really appreciate what you're doing at the bike path. it's just a really quality of life. You can tell somebody's doing something there, and I didn't know who was doing it. I thought it wasn't Service District 1, but I thought maybe it was.
No, but you can thank the mayor for the idea. We had money left in Parks and Rec this year, and so before it just disappeared back into the general fund, he suggested that we used it. So although it's not Service District 1, it is the Service District 1 chair who recommended it.
Well, I thank the mayor for that because it looks good, and I think it's real nice. And finally, I've been to a number of meetings that have been supported by Rebecca Valerio, and she is doing an outstanding job, not because she's one of my former kindergartners.
Patricia?
Patricia.
Right.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What
Get
did
it
I say?
right.
Excuse me. Patricia, I think she just is doing a great job. The memo that she sent us on facility is good, and I just wanted to, hopefully you could pass on that compliment from me, that I
Absolutely.
appreciate her professionalism. Thank you.
Bo?
Thank you. Just to piggyback there was a robust discussion about transfer stations at 2 solid waste advisory board meetings that I attended, and I think a lot of folks are receptive to it. I don't think you're alone in feeling that way. I think it's going to take some momentum and people getting serious about what that looks like and locations on where to do it, which is where it goes off the rails because people say, nope, we're not doing that there, or it's going to cost too much money, and it never gets brought up again till, not again, but 6 months later, someone will bring it up again, and it's kind of a cyclical but very brief discussion typically. I'm with you. I think that's a great idea. But to my question, I'm following up again to see if we've heard back from the city of Kodiak regarding that short-term rental service. The reason I ask is I have put an draft ordinance on hold under the assumption that we were going to secure this service. So how long are we going to wait for the city to decide to hit go on that? Because if not, I'm just going to dust that back off and continue with that licensing program ordinance.
That would be, Amy, I'm assuming you've had some discussions. Are you getting anywhere, or?
I invited the city to attend those meetings when we were doing the project demonstrations and then asked for a follow-up. I haven't, I spent most of my week on that $254,000. I'm not going to kid you because I would like to know why we didn't get that. But I haven't asked her recently, so I will write a note and ask her and see if they're interested. And we might just have to go to the city council and ask.
Yeah.
Or it could definitely be a joint, we don't have a joint work session planned.
No, but they're chairing the next one, so we could request on there. So, and Bo, another thing I'll just throw out there too is you can go back through the past minutes and that of both the assembly and the solid waste advisory board. It was approximately 8 to 9 years ago. There's extensive work done on transfer station. So it has been studied off and on, usually about every 10 years. So, any other questions? All righty. Move on to clerk's comments. Lena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to announce that we do have the candidacy packets ready to go, and we will be making those available on July 1st. The candidacy period starts August 1st through August 15th, so you'll have at least a month to fill those if anyone is interested in running for any of the seats that are vacant or becoming available this year.
Ryan, you got a question for the clerk?
I do, yeah. So as a sitting assembly member, how does one file to run for the mayor, and is that allowed? How does that work?
Oh,
Walk
yeah.
me through that process.
I don't have a response for you right off the bat, but I can definitely.
She does.
Yeah.
Amy
dying
did
to
it.
know.
I did. I was an assembly member when I ran for mayor, and the worst thing that could happen is that I didn't get elected and I kept my assembly seat.
Yep.
I can definitely get you
Yep.
the information and send that to you.
That's what recently happened. And that was 3 years ago.
You have competition.
So, next item is assembly members' comments. Bo, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Glad to see folks coming back in and getting these discussions going. I think we need to start talking about the challenging questions, the real questions here. This is all good day-to-day work we're talking about today, but at what point do we start talking about our revenue problem in the borough and our spending constraints? We have competing interests for funds. We heard another interested party today come in and say, hey, we might have, there might be another need for borough funding for services. How are we going to pay for it? Is the answer simply going to be we abolish MAPTR and have property owners continue to take the brunt, or do we explore other revenue streams? Someone mentioned marijuana tax. Does that ever go up, and what do we use it for? Do we consider the current, as some have put it, boom in tourism? We don't seem to be capitalizing on that very much, other than the obvious revenue stream for local businesses, which is great. Are we capturing that through the bed tax? I know I brought that up my first couple months on the assembly to match what the city of Kodiak is levying for a bed tax. Could this also be the code revisited to use tourism to fund community services? To me, if we're losing revenue in other areas, are we only going to think about increasing property taxes, which will make home ownership unachievable for those who are clawing their way out of lower income brackets into middle class? Are we going to continue to drive and escalate rent prices, which are going to push new entrants to our community out or keep them out? Or are we going to explore other areas for generating revenue for all of these needs? It's coming. We need to start having these discussions now, and to an earlier point, not wait till people are in front of us the week before a decision's made pleading for money because critical services are going to end. That's not the way we should handle this. So we need to start those discussions soon, and we need to get creative and think about other revenue streams.
Jared.
Thank you, and thanks for that, Bo. I want to second what Bo just said also. So whatever, I think the last fiscal year, Amy, you started a list of budget things to talk about. I mean, we could start off with just like a general revenue bullet, I suppose, on that. Another thing I would like to suggest to maybe add to that new list for next year. We moved on a little more quickly from the nonprofit process, and I think I was writing something before we moved on. It was my fault. It was completely my fault for not bringing this up. I would like to explore contracts instead of grants for some of the larger health and social services grants that we usually do, the 20, 25,000 ones that have been pretty regular over the past several years. I think I'd like to have a discussion about that when we get closer to, looking at budget and thinking about budget next year. I don't want that to fall off either. Let's see. The Shakespeares did well at nationals, better than they've done in the past. We actually made it to elimination rounds this year, which was really cool. And we were the only Alaskan school to make it to elimination rounds this year. So that was a good trip. It was framed by some violence with the shootings in Minneapolis and then the mass panic event in Des Moines. But they're back and they're ready to do this fundraiser for Scout DeVries this weekend if you can make it. And then finally, condolences to the Wellner family as they go through their loss.
Thank you. Steve?
I'd like to thank the people who came and talked about the need of childcare. I think it is a very definite need in this town. I know several single moms who it's a major issue, and it's something that the Assembly, I think, should try to work and help coordinate and promote as best we can, whether it's negotiating with facilities or whatever. But also, we do need to have a good contract to cover so we don't get into a bad position, which some of our past contracts have not been the best. Thank you.
Larry?
I want to, like Jared, I certainly agree with what Bo was talking about. I believe it's time we sit down and talk about finances. I think there's clouds on the horizon, and they're going to be there, and we can't wait. And our community needs to have a community discussion. The sooner the better. And I tend to worry about, the school budgets based on my history, but that's really not what I'm talking about. I think the whole borough really needs to take a look at what's going on and find ways to get us through this storm. I also do appreciate the presentation tonight, as we heard just a few moments ago. I think available childcare is a critical part of a healthy community, and I don't know what we could do. I mean, as far as supporting them, but I think anything that we can do to support them and to support this initiative would be good for the quality of life in our community. And I want to welcome our intern. I'm not sure what the title is, but everything that you presented since you've been here has given me nothing but confidence, and I appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Ryan.
No one inserted emojis in their comments. So, insert emoji, smiley face. Thank you, Captain Backus, for $14,000 for Kids for Safety for the fire department. I think that's fantastic. That's a great initiative from a staff member going out seeking these opportunities. And I would encourage all staff members to go and find opportunities. Don't just leave it to the key decision makers to fund those projects by themselves. So great opportunity, and I'm excited for that. I'm also excited to see new changes in the contracting department and the things that I've been hearing. I'll echo Mr. Ledoux. I think that the level of professionalism as we go through our changes is encouraging, and I would like to thank Dave for his many years of service here. So although we didn't always see eye to eye, I appreciate everything that he did and his sacrifices that he made for this organization. So I appreciate that. Last, I appreciate the explanation on how to run for mayor. With that, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Next item is mayor comments. No further comment. And work session is adjourned at 9:21. Thank you. Good night.